Okay, hey folks, Mark Locklear here, and this is a screencast on. This is really going to cover our last 2 weeks of class. So the last 2 weeks of DBA 210 are going to be very similar to what you did in DBA 120. You're going to design a database. I, Again, I just want to sort of emphasize the fact that number one, it's just important in general. It's important to, understand how to design a database correctly from scratch, implement tables, fields, database normalization, all of those things. And then the other thing too is that I don't run the final projects that you all will do for web technologies, but the feedback we often get, or the feedback that I got from Alec and Charlie Wallen and others who review those final projects is often the database design and normalization part is a big part of where students are weak at. So that's part of the justification for sort of spending as much time as we are on this. So if you look, I'm just going to walk through, I'll share my screen. I'm just going to walk through sort of what we have here and say a couple of words on it. Number one, so you do have a quiz. So really what I'm asking you to do, so you do have a quiz on chapter 10, which is the how to design a database chapter from the Mirac book. So I would go ahead and read that. I mean, that's part of the reason I'm sort of giving you the quiz is it's going to force you to go back and read that chapter. So take 30 minutes. I mean, it's not a terribly long read, but maybe take longer than that and just really take your time and try to absorb as much you can there. And then you've got actually a 20. I'm pretty sure I think this is a 20 question quiz. So there's rather than 10, if you recall from DBA 120, I think all those quizzes were 10 questions. So this is actually a 20 question quiz from the quiz bank for Mirac. So spend a little more time on that and really take in as much as you can on that. And then for the coding exercise, so again, similar to what you did. So for DBA 120, I gave you the elegant or I gave you I think elegant occasions, maybe what it's called. In fact, I've got it here. Um, yeah, right. I couldn't remember if I specifically named it that or not, but the elegant occasions, wedding planning. Some of you also did, funeral. You could also do a funeral service if you want. So I sort of gave you, spoon fed, if you will, the requirements for that project. So now this is next level, right? Now it's up to you to come up with your own business, your own system, and then the requirements for that system. So this is often the hardest part for many students. And I can general, and I get it from a software development standpoint. Um, from a software development standpoint, it's often difficult enough to take a set of requirements and turn that into a project, but it's even harder to sort of, it feels contrived is often the word you'll hear. It's like, okay, we're just trying to make something up so we can fill these requirements. And so that's a part of it. But part of it, again, is to really try to get the creative juices going, because let me say this about that. Um, we'll stop sharing just so we can have a face to face. Depending on the level you work at. Now, many of you, assuming you go on to do great things in software development or database design work, maybe will never get to the level where you're the one doing the design work. You may be a heads down developer. And many people like that. I mean, that's not it's not a slight on people and their skills. It just depends on what you're good at and where your strengths are. And many people, they just want to be heads down developers, and they want people to give them requirements. They want minimal input. They just want, well-developed requirements, and they can sit down and do their job. And then if there's any technical details they need to work out, they'll work in that context. So that's one level. But again, this next level is, and typically I can tell you this is the way it goes in software development too, as someone who's been doing this for 25 years now. I spent the first 20 years sort of on that heads down part. I mean, I've always been vocal and like to talk and work with people, so I've often been at the design level, in a not necessarily in a sophisticated way, but somebody who, did technical heads down work. And then the last probably 5 years, I've been on the IT project management side. So I'm sort of, at that next level. When I say up, not like up is this better or yeah, than someone else, but just that kind of a 10,000 foot view. You're thinking about things in a different way. And often that's the trajectory of someone's career in IT. They'll often do the more technical stuff for the first 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then as you get more experience and it's just sort of the natural arc of a career path. As you get more experience, you sort of start to think about things at a higher level. So you're doing more management type of things and just, architecture is a part. The other thing is, it's an actual job like database architecture or systems architect is a job and it is a job title. So it's not necessarily non-technical. It is very technical, but you're not necessarily you're not necessarily writing code, but you might be, again, you're developing things and thinking about things at a very high level. So that's really what this last 2 weeks is about, is trying to get you to sort of think of things at a high level. Again, you may never do it and you may not want to do it, but for the purposes of the education and the experience we're trying to give you here at AB Tech, we're forcing you hopefully to be uncomfortable that way, just so you understand it. Because even if you don't do that job, even as a heads down developer, you're going to have to work with people that are doing that job. They're likely going to come to you and maybe ask questions when they're trying to develop this larger system. They're likely going to come to you and ask questions about, specific technical questions about data types or table names or database normalization, or you may be in meetings where, again, your primary responsibility is not the architect to be able to, it's not the architecture of a system, but you're going to be a part of that team. So that's sort of the goal here, is again to get you to sort of think about things at a higher level. Okay. All right. Enough about that. So the other thing is that these are somewhat ambiguous requirements. What do I mean by ambiguous? If assuming you took my 120 class, I'm sure you heard me use that term more than once. It's just always not clear, right? When I say ambiguous, it's always not clear. And I generally, when I talked about in DBA 120, I talked a lot about ambiguity and it being a bad thing. You don't want that. And so all that's true. But what I'm saying is that at a project level, you will often get ambiguous requirements. And so think about product managers, or it could even be CEOs or sales people who have an idea for a system and they're sort of building, you're going through this first phase of trying to figure out what the system is going to look like. So there's often a lot of ambiguity there. And you, as the technical person, again, whether you're actually writing code or you're doing sort of project management, as a technical project manager, you sort of need to help clarify the more ambiguous parts of a project. So that's part of this too, is these requirements are sort of intentionally ambiguous. Okay. And so let me go window. I mean, there's a fair amount of clarity. I think I've made this fairly clear, but again, these are general. I'm asking you for an entity relationship diagram. I'm asking you for business rules, constraints, database normalization, set up scripts. So they're specific in that way, but obviously they're not specific to the database you're trying to build. That's going to be your job to come up with that. So, but I just wanted to mention that this idea of ambiguity, and I can't remember I've seen a lot of job requirements lately too, where something to the tune of the potential employee should be able to work in an environment where requirements are ambiguous, something to that effect. Basically, what they're saying is, hey, even when we don't know 100% what we want, you need to be able to work in that environment. So I just right before this screencast, I got off a call where there were very ambiguous project requirements we were trying to work with. So you can't just say you can't always just throw up your hands and say, you know what, you all figure out what you want and then come to me as the developer. When you figure out what you want, then come to me and I'll build it for you. You have to be a little more You have to be a little more patient than that. And even when folks don't know what they want, help them work through the things that they want. And from a technical standpoint, you're using your technical background to tell them what's possible or what, some things take a lot more time, energy, and effort than other things do. And so that's part of your job from a technical standpoint, not just, somebody gives you requirements and you write the code for it, but where you're able to advise and consent from other non-technical folks about particular features or issues or systems. So yeah, so again, this is going to be similar to what you did for DBA 120. The deliverables that you're giving me are going to be similar to, or are going to be very similar to that. But in addition, the three chapters that we covered, the three new chapters for DBA 210 that we covered, and then that may, for future classes, chapters may be different between 120 and 210. But I know this semester, backup strategy, 9, 10, and 11, you see here, backup strategy, appropriate user accounts, server monitoring strategy. Some of this is going to be squishy. That's a technical term that I'm using. It's actually not, I'm being facetious. But when I say squishy, the server monitoring strategy, just, based on the chapter we covered and the work we did, include a paragraph about what server monitoring might look like. In a production environment, you're probably going to have systems people who've been doing server monitoring for years, and they can talk about that kind of stuff. But again, this is a high level, you're almost acting as a project manager, IT, a technical IT project manager might be the actual job description or role that you're going to be playing here, and you're going to be creating this larger plan. Now, I've been, again, from an ambiguity standpoint, for DBA 120, I gave you a specific list of deliverables like this PDF, this script. I'm intentionally not doing that this time because, again, this is a second level. This is a 200 level class. So you've been through this before where, there was a little more hand holding going on. So I'm explicitly not giving you a list of deliverables. You should be able to um, look at the requirements that I have here and create a list of deliverables based on that. I'll answer questions. Certainly if you have questions about specific things, then send me an email or, stop me in the hall and ask me. However, I may say, what, figure it out, or, use your best guess, use your best judgment on how you should put these together. I've got these listed in a numbered format. You're not going to create a document for each one of these. Certainly, at a minimum, there should be a paragraph for each one of these. The entity relationship diagram is probably going to be a separate document or a separate image, right? Depending on how you put these things together. Again, it should be a sort of cogent, comprehensive narrative that talks about the project as a whole. It's going to have some technical pieces you're going to submit and talk about, and then it's going to have some more sort of non-technical pieces too. The idea here is that the sort of in a submission like this, the documents and all of the supporting pieces, there should be sort of something for everybody on a design or I'll just say a project team. So the technical folks, the technical folks are going to gravitate toward the entity relationship diagrams, the database constraints, database normalization, maybe the setup scripts, the more technical stuff. The maybe non-technical folks are going to gravitate toward the business rules, the business narrative, other things like that. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that. So the goal here is for week 7 is to just give me these things, this narrative summary. Again, this should sort of be a non-technical description of what the business is and maybe what the database is going to look like. And I think I put a note here, imagine you're explaining it to your grandmother in a way that she could understand. That's probably a bit of a stretch, but you sort of get the picture. It should be a non-technical. You're really just describing, again, an average person on the street. Let's say you could pull them aside and sort of they could read this narrative and have an idea about what it looks like. That's the sort of non-technical piece. Again, this is for week 7. the entity relationship. I do want, so I've got the entity relationship narrative here. Again, this is going to be a little more technical, but sort of a conversational paragraph about uh, what the entity relationship diagram is. The third bullet I've got here is the actual entity relationship diagram. This doesn't need to be fully fleshed out, but like all of the main parts should be there, right? And so you can think about this like in my mind, like the tables, all of the tables should be 80% of the way there or so, if not all of the way there. And then maybe you don't flesh out the tables 100% with all. So for instance, let's say there's a user table you're going to have. You're probably going to have authentication on this system. So if there's a users table, you don't maybe have to flesh out the users table 100% first name, last name, address one, address two, but that users table should be there. And maybe you add a few of those cut columns to it again in week 7. Now in week 8, for the final complete project, when you submit that, you should have a fully fleshed out entity relationship diagram. Each table should have a complete set of fields, or fields and the data types associated with them. So really the idea here is the first week, week 7, that first week should be you're just giving me a sort of general layout of, again, the narrative summary, so I understand what the business is, what it does, a, you know, a narrative around the entity relationship diagram, so I understand what the database is going to look like, and then again, sort of a first stab at the entity relationship diagram. And then I'll grade that, and then the feedback is going to be, hopefully, if I see anything that's missing, or you know what, I really think you should have a roles table, that complements the user table that you've got here, something like that. Anything that I see that's sort of grossly, that's missing and should be there, or if you're 100% off base, then that's a chance for me to sort of give you feedback. I mean, the idea here is, rather than me giving you these requirements all as a part of the last week, and then you submit something that's way off base. So I'm sort of baking in a week here. And I mean, this could be, the bar is going to be somewhat high here in that, again, you've got 2 weeks to work on this. I mean, ideally, I would start looking at it prior to 2 weeks, but you've got 2 weeks to start looking at this and working on it. So you should have a very robust submission for week 8, which again, week 8's the sort of final submission. Everything should be done, should be fully complete. So again, this should be, and this should be a step up. If you think about what you submitted for DBA 120, this should be a step up from that, because in addition to, everything you submitted there's also backup strategy and some other things there. So, and I mean, this is the second time you've sort of gone through a big project like this. So not only the addition of the things that I asked for, but I mean, you should be getting a little better at it and feel a little more confident this time around. So if you have any questions about, the business you're thinking about using as a model for this, ideally, this is something, if you have any experience at a business you've worked at in the past, this is a perfect opportunity to take the knowledge you've already got in a particular domain or particular space that you've worked in, and apply that to a project here. Again, try and be as creative as you can. Don't copy what you did from DBA 120. Come up with something new. And again, ideally, this is an area that you know a little about, something you've spent some time in. If you've got, I know many of you may not have work history, or you just don't have the life experience to be able to apply to something like that. So you can, for those of you who are like that, you can choose something more generic. But certainly, if you've worked in a particular business in the past, or something like that, that's an ideal way, because something well, and the nuts and bolts of, you're going to be able to apply into a database system like that. And it's going to make it funner for you. And it's going to be easier to do too. Something, creating a system around a process or a business you already know is going to be a lot easier than, again, trying to pull something out of thin air. On the AI, I wanted to say something about using AI tools for this. Using AI is okay, because you probably will. I just recently had a very large project that I'm going to be working on in the next year. We're hiring a contractor to do it, but I'm going to be the technical project manager for it. and I needed to come up with the requirements. This is a brand new system, 100% new for us, but I have I have a very good idea specifically about the technical things that I'm looking for. And I used ChatGPT for it. Now, my process was I spent, a couple of weeks, probably between, I would say, 5 and 8 hours writing a Google Doc and coming up with the requirements that I needed first. And then I pasted that into ChatGPT, and that was about a page long, and maybe not quite a page, but basically it was just bullet points of just things that I knew the system needed, and just things that it needed to do. And it took me many, many hours of work just to come up with those. Then I pasted that into ChatGPT, and I wrote a fairly long narrative about, hey, we're building a system that's going to do X, Y, and Z. We needed to do this, that, and the other thing. And again, when I talk about a narrative, I mean, that's the other important part of this. It's not just for other human beings, but with AI and the power that AI gives you, you need to talk to it like a human being. So that's the other part. I tell humanities folks and English teachers and those people who, they say that they don't like AI and that. I'm like, listen, this is an opportunity for you because without English language skills and good writing skills, you can't interact with these tools in an effective way. So if you use AI for this, my strong suggestion, and in fact, I would suggest you probably use AI for it because it's going to do a better job on sort of filling in some of the bits and pieces that you may leave out. But do the work up front and spend hours, I would say, writing your own sort of project documentation to begin with, and then paste that into Chat GPT and have it, it's very good. AI tools out there are very good about the narrative part of a lot of things. And so it can really fill in a lot of again, just the bits and pieces or gray space, if you will, that when you're thinking from a technical standpoint, you may not think about, but that's the process that I use. So I would ask you to use that, but don't paste the assignment into Chat GPT and then tell it to come up with an idea for you. It's probably going to end up being more work than you want. So I would say try to flex your creative juices as much as you can to begin with. Come up with an idea for a business that you want. Try and flesh it out as much as you can. Again, you can work inside of Microsoft Word or Google Doc or whatever platform you're most comfortable with. Try to flesh it out there first. You may want to email that to me prior to moving forward and just say, hey, this is, if you have any questions about, say, hey, this is what I'm thinking about. Do you think this is going to work? I can give you some feedback. But, again, at that point, once you feel like you've got it, 60, 70% of the way there, then paste that into Chat GPT. Again, the narrative needs to be there. Just don't paste a bunch of requirements in there. Have a conversation with your AI about this is what I'm trying to achieve. And it's often a back and forth. I can say that for this project that I'm mentioning that I worked on, I spent a few hours, or more, 5 to 7 hours upfront writing requirements, pasted those into ChatGPT. And then there were another few hours of work just sort of working within ChatGPT to say, okay, I like this piece, but I don't like this other piece you suggested. Can you change that? So, you know, this, a change I'm trying to make when I talk about AI now is AI is not artificial intelligence. I like the term augmented intelligence because it's just that. It's there to augment the work that the human being is doing. So yeah, think about that as you work through this. Okay. That's all I have. I'm going to stop now. If you have questions, let me know, and good luck.